Welcome everybody to the 8th episode of Live from the Trevor Zoo. I'm Alan Tousignant, Director of the Trevor Zoo. Welcome back to this live series if you've been here before, and if you haven't, we hope that you'll keep tuning in. We're going to do these shows every Wednesday at 4, and we hope to see you here. Today, with the help of Jono Meigs and Abigail McEnroe, we're going to take a little trip back in time to learn about Frank Trevor, who founded the zoo in 1936. We'll have time for questions at the end, so as we go along, if you have questions, type them into the comments section on Facebook and we'll answer them at the end. In 1936, after commencement of Millbrook School's 5th year, Edward Pulling, the school's founding headmaster, was looking for the school's first biology teacher, and he found what he was looking for in a young man fresh out of Cornell University. Frank Trevor famously arrived on the Millbrook campus with a station wagon filled with animals, which, as Ed Pulling told us, became the Millbrook Zoo. In fact, with permission from Mr. Pulling and the school's board, the first, and for many years only, zoo building was built in 1936 by Frank and a few of his enthusiastic students, including James Buckley from the class of 1940, reportedly for the cost of $6, which was the cost of the electrician. The first iteration of the zoo was modest, obviously, but eventually it has evolved into what our visitors and students enjoy today. But those early days were a fascinating time, and fortunately for us, Frank Trevor was an avid photographer and filmmaker. And that leads us to the subject of today's episode of Live from the Trevor Zoo. 10 years ago, we made a documentary about the first 75 years of the zoo. In the course of doing this documentary, we discovered a lot of Frank's early footage from the 40s, 50s, and 60s that he had taken in and around the zoo and around campus as well, actually. So with former zoo director Jono Meigs from the class of 1965, who was actually our director for over 40 years, and Abigail McEnroe, Frank and Janet Trevor's daughter, we're going to take a look at that footage in this documentary, and they're going to narrate many of the scenes as we go. So take it away, Jono and Abigail.
I'm Jono Meigs.
Hi, I'm Abigail McEnroe. I used to be at the zoo a long, long time ago when I was a child with my brother Michael and my older brother Don.
All right, who do we have here?
This looks like brother Mike, my middle brother with Saber, that I think belonged to Hubert Will, and it probably was in the 60s. And that's Timber, a timber wolf that was brought to our house on Christmas Eve and deposited. And we put her in the bathroom and left a note for my parents. They'd been out that evening. And we said, don't go in the bathroom, there's a timber wolf. Now, she came in and she had been caught by a snare trap. She was very thin and had a lot of diarrhea, but my mother was used to things living in her bathroom, and our whole downstairs was pretty much an infirmary for whatever was dumped on our door, whatever day or night.
This cage, actually, we modified later to make a badger cage before we finally took it down. And I'll tell you, this thing was well built. It took us hours with a sledgehammer to try to remove this thing.
Well, I think that wolf later, Don Kerr took care of. And I was heartbroken because I was very disappointed that it was going back to the zoo and not staying with me. But I think he went on later to work with wolves, didn't he?
Yeah, I think that's right.
She certainly looks beautiful there compared to what she looked like when she first came.
Now, did some of these animals spend time in your house?
Almost anything that was injured would spend time in our house. We were the infirmary. And then they would move up to the zoo when they were healthier. And here's Daddy with a coati, and I'm assuming that's got to be late 30s, early 40s, because it looks like it's over at their little yellow house on the way to Smithfield where they used to live. And they didn't live in campus at that point.
Ah, the cod liver oil.
Those noses could get in a lot of trouble. I think different. I remember one time it got its paw in a wrong cage, and Dr. Lukens had to amputate, and that was my first situation of watching a vet do an operation. But it came out very well, and she lived to be a ripe old age.
So this is Bill Woodcock, is that right?
I'm not sure who it is. At this point, I would be so young I wouldn't know.
Oh, so here's the cod liver oil. This is definitely a photo op. Nothing particularly interesting about that tree except that it's got cod liver oil all over it.
Now, I'm assuming back then something like that would have been relatively rare at the zoo. Remember, we never got to choose our animals. It was only what arrived at our door. And something even like the kinkajou here would have been something special at that point.
Now, I remember your mom, I think, told me this was Demon.
I, at this point, was probably in three-cornered pants. If even around. I do note how nice the flowers look when the zoo was first built. And how they love their bananas.
Well,
That's
the flowers, that would have been your mom's influence, yeah?
Yeah, later the greenhouse, but I saw in one of these shots earlier that there were some roses. Certainly that looks like fall and some mums, so. And the zoo's looking pretty spiffy at that point. Give it another 40 years and a lot of pee and poop, and it gets pretty iffy.
This is the front step of the old zoo, I think.
Yeah.
It's actually a great shot of an animal eating upside down.
He loved to
You
show
could-
off what they could do with their tails.
You try standing on your head and eating, it doesn't go so well.
Now this is my mother with Lucifer, and Lucille. There were three little raccoons. We actually got them just as their eyes opened. And they were just three that really clicked, and they went all over the place. They went to kindergarten. They went to the central schools all over and showed them off. And later that summer, they went to the island with us, and you saw three little kids with three little raccoons heading off to the beach, and we got them down to the tide pools. And they're fascinating because if they found a little starfish or anything, they patted on their stomach. And then they were really happy. They had to wash everything, of course. And they spent the summer getting out of their cage and climbing trees, and we got tired of climbing spruce trees looking for them. So if they got out of their cage, we'd just leave their food there, and they'd come back in a couple day or two. But they later went on to, at least Lucinda anyway, went to the Gary Moore show in New York and also the Arthur Godfrey show. But sadly enough, she was never the same after that show. She got kind of grumpy, and as they got older, they got more aggressive. But they were a lot of fun for quite a few years and did a lot of PR for the zoo. I don't know, do you remember the invention of all the animal feeds? I remember we had dry dog food we fed a lot of stuff to, and wonderful Hill's horse meat, and then the addition of vitamins. But the best one was the introduction of monkey chow that Dad served to most of quite a few Millbrook elite one night at a dinner party when he discovered monkey chow in a dip. Then he told him halfway through the evening.
So I think this is a ring-tailed cat, is that right?
Well, I hate to say I've kind of forgotten.
Now here's Mike with an opossum, yeah?
Yeah, and Goldie, the Cocker Spaniel, there was in the background. And that was another situation. The mother was hit on the road, and we put it in a quiet cage for the night to see what we could do for her. At that point, not much. And we opened the box in the morning, and she had passed away, but we didn't know that she had a whole bunch of these guys in her little pouch. Now, this was taken, their eyes were just opening when we got them, so these pictures were taken a little bit later. But they were just so much fun to have. And again, we went to all the local schools again. Whatever school we were in, they went to. But these little guys, you could snap them on your arm. The way they carry on their mom, snapping on the fur, you could snap them on your arm and line them right up. But an eyedropper was a good way to feed them. And a lot of hours. We'd take shifts. And they live at our house. Generally on top of the washer and dryer.
Well, of course, we're still doing lots of rehab at the zoo. But probably the biggest difference is that most of the animals don't travel home anymore.
Yeah, that's probably good. We didn't have any china or lampshades left.
Although, actually, some of the little guys, we have some squirrels and possums. Usually those first days, they're going home with someone at night. So, from viewing the film with your mom in the early 70s, she tells me this is Reddy, who was housebroken. Now, does that
She
mean housebroken? Does that mean Reddy lived at the house?
No, I think she probably has. A lot of her animals in the early years came through Ivan Sanderson and his network of people that he knew. And there were a lot of different groups, and probably somebody housebroke a fox somewhere along the line, just as they housebroke the black pig that used to live at the zoo, if you'll remember. And then after that's over with, somehow they'd end up at Millbrook. They always came with something wrong with them. Not that this was a great idea, but then she had to go back to pooping outside. But she lived for a long time. She'd be a little ornery, but she also would fall in love with certain people and get along very well with them. And I think she lived to be a ripe old age. I don't know if they kept track how long foxes live in captivity, but she certainly had to be right up there.
So this is Ginger, yeah?
Yep.
Ginger, one of your dad's favorites.
Yep. I have to kind of chuckle that in all these films, Dad always liked an action shot. We did not roughhouse that much with all these animals, believe me, but he thought a nice action shot was a good idea. So we do a little bit more than normal. But mostly they lived a pretty quiet life. You know, somewhere there's a deer in the background. We used to get deer in the springtime when the farmers would mow, and they'd get injured and we get the baby deer. These are Barbados sheep that actually were from direct descendants of some of the original sheep. And although now people can get Barbados quite easily, these are pretty special in their day. This is Zipper. She came from some friends of Ivan and Ivan Sanderson's, and she also had been taken care of. She loved green beans. That had to be in her diet every day. That was one of the requirements of her coming to the zoo.
My
I don't know who this is, Jono. I don't remember it in particular. It looks like it's an older shot. The only one I ever knew lived in a box, and I used to feed the zoo during vacations. I never saw the animal. I'd bring the food every day, and I never saw it.
So I don't know how this worked. Your mom told me this animal did tricks. So if it never came out of the box, that's interesting.
No, it's got to be one of the early ones. Probably late 30s, early 40s, long before I was along. Yeah, he does tricks there. And these were wonderful little skunks.
I think this is Archie McClay.
Yeah. We really enjoyed having the skunks. A baby skunk, there's nothing cuter and more fun. As I said before, I thought they were all going to live with me the rest of my life.
And they were not deskunked, right?
No, they weren't. Mainly you just don't want to scare them. But they're a lot of fun, and to watch them grow is exciting. No, I wouldn't say that. I recently had one move in underneath my B&B. Before the guests came, we had to figure out how to get it out of there. And there's a little one. We always had baby everythings in the kitchen. Robins and raccoons and woodchucks. There might be multiple groups of each. Nope.
So this you think maybe is a wild skunk?
I don't know. It would be running off, and knowing Dad, you never know quite how he staged them. Looks awfully well fed to be a wild one.
Now this picture of this kangaroo rat, this must have been more amusing to your father than your mother.
Well, I thought, by looking at the leaves there, I figured it probably was in their garden or something. It certainly caught his attention. Probably lost all his beans or something.
Again, your mom told me that this animal ate all the roots of the plants in the greenhouse.
Well, then that's where they found it. Probably didn't disturb it too much either. Dad was always impressed how industrious they were. Yep, certainly not too scared either.
Now here's a good example of baby animals to feed. This is a really early shot, probably from the late 30s, early 40s. And they would probably live in that little basket most of the night. We didn't have a lot of cages. It's just kind of what was around the house. And squirrels were always fun. We had a succession of flying squirrels for a while, but they would always get a little older and start nailing you. And that's our dog again.
So this, I think, is one of those little guys grown up. And I know you had a squirrel at one point named Singer,
Yeah.
who was named for the designs he would make on your arm.
He probably just got turned loose and lived at the zoo and created some havoc. This is woodchucks, the annual spring event. And this looks like one Dad probably had of his own. I'm not sure. Maybe one of the original ones he brought with him. Seems too interested in Dad to be just a quick zoo pickup. Looks like he's done that quite a bit with a Ritz cracker. That's a handy food item. And this definitely is taken over at the little yellow house over towards Smithfield that they lived at. There we go.
That, I think, is Henry Milford, class of 42.
Is it really? Yeah.
That's one animal we have never had since I've been here. We've never had a tame woodchuck.
They can be pretty ornery. You have to get them at the right stage. Here's the animal that stole my mother's heart. This was a little baby porcupine she raised, and there was never an animal that she raised in all those years that one was the most special. Wait till you see its little face. There. Is that a face to die for? I don't think this is the same animal. I think Daddy just kind of flipped him here. We had a whole lot of them anyway. This one seems... They get grumpier as they get older, like the rest of us.
That, I think, was Hank Milford again.
His mom lived in Armenia and worked there, and he was a day student. Went on to be a doctor and helped Dad on a lot of medical stuff at the zoo, trying to figure out nutrition. It was hard. We didn't have the feeds then. We used evaporated milk and horrible things and whole milk and dissolved vitamin pills and tried to get some extra calcium in there, but it was tricky sometimes. You know you didn't hit it right.
We, of course, have the benefit of years of research, nutritional research now.
Now these are the capybaras, and I don't know if they were there when you were there.
Never had capybaras here.
They're basically a large guinea pig. And they were wonderful. We had fun with them for years, probably at least 2 years, maybe 2.5 years. And they kept growing and growing and growing, and they were a lot of fun, and we'd walk them around. They'd clank around with those little feet. What do you think?
This looks like a little winter recreational
Yeah,
activity.
I'm not quite sure whether they
harassing the animals.
I'm also thinking that maybe it was wintertime and they wanted to get them out there, but the next shot doesn't look like winter, although everybody has heavy coats on. They were, I'm not sure if this is one of Dad's photography tricks or what, but they were trying to pick up Napoleon and Josephine.
Now we've moved on to a muskrat house.
Yeah, that's no beaver hut. Because Napoleon and Josephine used to be loaned out to people to make dams. Well, the problem was they made the dam in the wrong place. Now, I don't know if this is over at Tamarack with Jesse and Jesse Bonnecue or if this is at Stillman's, but see what they did? They flooded the road.
Yeah, I think that's Stillman's.
Yep. And that guy in the little red shirt might be one of the young Bonnecue men. That's my brother Doan. There's my mother. Probably a Trevor car, if it ran.
Now again, your mother told me that on this particular loan they put 2 beavers out and got 5 beavers back.
Yep.
They had 3 young.
Yep,
while
there
they
they
were
are.
residents at Stillman's.
Now, Napoleon and Josephine, you can see they had a little Weight Watchers problem. Those little kids were just as fat as they could be, and they'd never been handled before, and there's our dog Goldie. And we were all brought that day to do a little photo session with them.
So now you're on the left there, and in the
Yep.
middle is
Mike, my middle brother, and Doan, my oldest brother. And those, Josephine went on the Gary Moore show, tromped on a piano one day and got in trouble, but beyond that, Dad used to take animals, and there was the pair of them, and they were loaned out over, and I think they went to the Sharp Reservation is the last place they ended up, and I think that's the last we heard of them. But again, they used that wonderful strong pen because they couldn't get out of it. I do know that one year they decided to build an indoor beaver pen, which was a cement monstrosity that you'd put water in. The only problem was Dad said a beaver's life ambition is to stop any leaks, so they would cram the stays dry down the drain and clog it up. So then it would become a murky mess. And they can have a little odor to them. Oops, why don't you help it in, Gail? There's the old zoo fence. Okay. Mom was good with multiple shots. Now we'll get the beaver in the pen. Here we go. And shut the gate always. This is Hubert Will. He escaped from Hungary with his Vizsla dogs. He was not able to bring his animals out with him, so he immediately started collecting them again. And he and Daddy struck it up, and the animals were allowed to stay at Millbrook School. And he worked with a local vet named Dr. Lukens. And he worked for him for quite a few years, then he went on to Hollywood.
and he actually lived over at Dr. Lucan's place?
Yes, yep. He helped assist him for about 5 or 6 years. But in the meantime, he collected the lion and the leopard and the mountain lion and falcons and macaws of all different kinds and trained them all. And you can see he had the dog and the leopard spend a lot of time together. So they were best of friends. Now this is the early stages of training. Not everything goes the way you want. Sometimes the stepladder falls over too. I'm not quite sure how all this goes over with the public now. Whee!
That's really remarkable.
She used to be in my bedroom. She was actually a very nice cat.
Well, of course, we draw the line at bobcats now. No
Yeah.
big cats.
Well, I think they have a special place, and it's in a few places. I think this was just a kind of a special circumstance with somebody who undoubtedly was going to collect animals and train them. This is down towards our house.
So I guess his real love was falconry?
Yes, he was. I think that's what he was the best at, was training falcons. They would zoom that whole field down by down by your house. What used to be your house. And they'd circle for quite a while, and then he'd call them back in, and they were really good.
There's a peregrine falcon, yeah?
Mm-hmm. There were quite a few different trainers that came across, and animal people that came with him when they escaped. Some good, some not so good. Here's one of his, Sapphire, that was her name. I just thought of it. This is the beginning stages of how to stand on your head. Takes a while. Do you have many monkeys like this anymore?
We do no solitary monkeys, and there
Mm.
were a number of them when I came to work here.
Yeah.
Most of them just get too neurotic.
That was our problem. I remember one time, the only animals I used to get bit by systematically was the capuchin monkeys, so I do not have a great love for them. Now, what pen is this of yours now?
This is... you don't know where we are.
That's up in the corner where I think like the alpacas are and stuff. This is an
Or
oodad.
maybe up where the Sika deer are.
Yeah, where the Sika deer
Yeah,
were.
Up in the...
This
up in
is
the
an
corner.
oodad, and that's my baby donkey. But he at one point caused a lot of havoc. I used to be able to take him to ball games and make him hee-haw on command, which the Millbrook Mustangs did not appreciate.
So here we are with a screech owl.
We used to have a variety of those over the years that would live on the antlers of the stuffed heads that Dad had of different deer or something in his study. And this, I think, is the golden eagle, isn't it?
No, I think this is Sister.
Is
This
this
is a
Sister?
red tail, yeah.
Well, then that's Sister.
Who I think set a longevity record at 25. We've now
Yeah.
got a hawk in the zoo at 29.
This is
There's
Squeaky.
or just the
Yep.
tail.
Just the tail. That's all that could come out of that cage. Squeaky came from Ivan Sanderson, and Squeaky had hurt some people, and Ivan didn't want to put him down, and so he came to live with us for I don't know how long as I lived there, I think. And Dad thought it'd be cute to get pictures of him. He liked to pull in food with his tail, and he was the only cage that was padlocked.
You look like you're in your regular work clothes there.
Yeah, Dad thought it'd be colorful to have my ballet outfit for the day. Just be known that that monkey had cold banana fingers, smearing them all over you.
Now, Squeaky was the only animal in the zoo that ever had a padlock on his
Right.
cage?
Right. My father had been attacked by a squirrel monkey when he was in the Boy Scouts, and he had a scar to prove it, and he knew what they could do.
And what do we have here?
Is that a potto?
That sounds right.
No. They don't move much. It's amazing they got him to move around that much that day. This is the
Ah.
farm safety shot. My father, it's the only time I really heard him laugh. He thought that was just terrific. I went and got a cement block, put it on top of a metal, and that's Margie Howard being brave enough to hold on to that. Okay. Guess that was the donkey pen the donkey got out of. My husband saw the shot and said, "No wonder I married you."
I don't think this is OSHA approved.
Who's this, Jono?
That looks like Ray Analia, maybe.
I bet you made him dig it down below the frost line, too.
Who's a class behind me? There's Mike Thompson, my classmate. So now we're back probably in 64
Yeah.
or something like that.
Yeah. Must be something busted somewhere, huh?
I think Noel Rowe was in this shot somewhere. So that's that whole area behind the zoo.
Yeah, that's all filled in now, huh?
You probably know more about the owls.
I've got to a great horned owl here. And I don't know how he did these shots.
Yeah, we're wondering whether the owl was out for the day.
If it was, it certainly was tame and happy to stick around.
Yeah, probably came back.
Now we're on to an African eagle owl. And we've also gone back in time.
I like this one.
Now we have a hypnotized African eagle owl. And you can see this is a pretty reasonable bird. He's got no glove on. Beautiful bird. And a family of barn owls.
See no evil, speak no evil, hear no evil. I'm wondering if they were where they're gotten from. I know we used to get our screech owls every now and then from Jesse Bonacue's barns. He'd find them when he was moving the hay around.
These guys must be siblings.
And this was the period of the macaws. We think this is Greg's shower. Certainly a beautiful bird. Who's arguing with who?
And I don't know what the bird is there.
I don't either. This is more of the springtime nursery in the Trevor kitchen. This is not the same 3 raccoons as before. This is another batch. And we used to get all the deer because of the mowing accidents, but this one had all its legs.
So how old are you here, probably?
Probably about 11 or 12 there. That's in our kitchen. I remember one day, sitting in the kitchen and there were things all over the kitchen. I had to kind of chuckle, wondering how Mom was going to cook supper that night. We had birds warming up. We had things chattering to be fed. Thank heavens for Coke bottles. They didn't break. Look at them. It's for the deer, guys, not you. And this is one of Hubert Will's mountain lions. I thought for sure I'd get this thing to sit up, but this animal never had any respect for me. We'd just do this endlessly, and he'd never sit up. Didn't come Dad, and guess what? It sits up. What we don't do with a ram
So we're back into those clips of the Barbados, yeah?
Yep, this is the ram. Now this, I can't tell if this is the crosses or not, or if these are the purebreds. There was a little mistake at the zoo one year when either something got through somewhere or we didn't remember. But there was a Mouflon sheep, which we forgot was in the sheep department, and sheep that are in the sheep department got together and produced a new family. Now we had a lot of trouble getting the Barbados to live. The young lambs, we had absolutely no trouble getting the Barbados crosses to live. They lived forever. You inherited them, didn't you?
I did. And finally I had to find a home for them. They went on and on.
They just hybrid vigor, I guess.
Again, we've gone back in time now. I'm not sure I really want monkey's hands in my mouth.
Especially after cold bananas. Ish. It wasn't like they were brand new bananas either. Now this is Caesar.
So
Well-
what year are we in now?
Oh, we're back in the mid-50s again. He came by way of Ivan Sanderson, too. And he spent a lot of time at our house, and he spent a lot of time at the zoo. And what we mainly wanted to do was exercise him. That was to make, her, very happy, trying to keep her exercised. And so we would play a lot of soccer with her. One day she decided while sitting, she'd sit in our living room a lot of the time, and she just decided she was going to jump up on my mother's china shelf. My mother didn't own one piece of china that was left in one piece over the years. And she used to run upstairs and collapse any lampshade she could find on the second floor.
Now, your dad was a strong guy. You can see how strong that animal is as it snaps him around in the end of that leash.
Yeah, now it's probably, we used to actually, on the way back to the zoo, is Dad would get in the front, drive, and someone would sit in the back and hold on, and Dad would say, okay, here we go. And we'd start the car, and we'd start out slow, and then we'd go a little faster, and a little faster, and a little faster. And I think we got up to about 35 miles an hour. And the kids kept yelling, let's do 80. I hear they can do 80. But we never did that. But that could wear her out a little bit. I think she used to go to some football games, but then I think that got banished away too. I can't remember exactly how long she stayed, but she went to a 12-year-old girl in Vermont. I'm not sure why our house cat was in that shot. It was my mom brushing her. We used to brush her a lot. She liked that. Get the spots all going one way. This is how we really exercised her.
So this is up in the old zoo.
The old zoo with my brother Don, who's probably about 12 or 13 there. And she'd bounce off the aquarium, so it was probably nifty for them. Bounce off the back beam there and come around. You can see how well she got exercise that day. She's out of breath a little bit.
And how long was she part of the zoo?
I can't remember. I'm thinking maybe only about 3 years, but then she went to Vermont. A lot of animals didn't get to stay all that long. It's once they were better or whatever happened. Dad seemed to find places that they had to go to, and because we always had an influx coming in, we had to move some out. And back then, the economy was a problem. I mean, he had to keep his expenses down, and cats would be an expensive thing to feed. When Tom Lovejoy went to Egypt for a year, he decided he would loan the Trevors his car. So one night on date night, I told my father we have to drive my little boyfriend home to Millerton. Well, that's not a short ride. So my father thought it'd be cool. He said, sure, I'd be glad to. So he put the boyfriend in the back seat, put the leopard in the back seat, put me in the front seat, and off we went to Millerton. Which fine until the leopard pooped partway to Millerton. Didn't get another date.
Well, I hope you can all agree that footage was pretty wild and fun. Thanks to Jono and Abigail for their historical and sometimes hysterical take on that large collection of footage. Oftentimes when you're going back in time, the only connection you have to some of these memories and footage is people that were actually there. So thanks to both Jono and Abigail for providing that. Certainly a lot has changed for all zoos since those early days and the time of that footage. The Trevor Zoo of today has been accredited by the Association of Zoos and Aquariums since 1989. That association has the highest standards of animal care and husbandry to which all of its members adhere to be able to remain accredited. In my mind, that's one of the hallmarks of AZA and what makes AZA accredited zoos so special. Just so you know, there are about 2,000, maybe 2,100 facilities that are licensed by USDA in the United States to exhibit animals, but only about 230 zoos are accredited by the Association of Zoos and Aquariums. It's a difficult standard to meet, but it's the right standard to meet. We at the Trevor Zoo have about 80 species of birds, mammals, fish, amphibians, and reptiles that include 10 endangered species. Our main goal is to work with our students here at Millbrook to create the next generation of students and learners of all ages, that includes our visitors, to understand the natural world and wildlife and the role that we humans play in that role. The decisions that we make today are more important than ever in terms of the work that has to be done to conserve the natural history of our world around the globe. So that comes through loud and clear in our mission, which I'm actually just going to read: to educate our students and visitors about wildlife and the natural world in order to inspire all to live responsibly. That was Frank's main message back in the 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s, and it remains our message today. So a huge thanks to Frank Trevor for getting this ball going, and actually for Ed Pulling for hiring him, and then for Seward Hiley, who was director for a short period of time, and then Jonathan Meigs, who again shepherded the zoo through 42 years, including the transition from sort of the pre-AZA days to the modern zoo of today, which took a complete rebuilding of the facilities to be able to get up to the standards required by AZA. Before we go to questions, I'd like to thank everyone who was able to support us on Giving Tuesday Now yesterday at www.millbrook.org/zoo donations. Hint, hint, in case you weren't able to make a donation yesterday and still would like to. That was a wonderful day filled with recognition of the fact that a lot of people out there really care about what we do and are very helpful in supporting us. So thank you very much. So with that, let's see if we have any questions, and I'll see if I can be as insightful as Jono and Abigail.
Sybil is asking, are there any plans to expand the size of the zoo?
That's a good question. The size of the zoo will probably remain the same, but actually we have an ad hoc committee of the Board of Trustees of Millbrook School that will begin to meet soon. We actually had hoped to meet already, but the coronavirus lockdown has changed our plans a bit, so things have been put off a little bit. But that committee is charged with looking at the strategic plan and master plan for the zoo moving forward. We will probably see some changes to some of the exhibits in the zoo, but not the physical size of the property. We are surrounded on all sides by property that has really good conservation easements, and then of course the street and the school on the other side of the road. And those will maintain the zoo at its current size into perpetuity, but we certainly have some plans to do some different exhibits. I don't know exactly what those are going to be yet, because we really need this ad hoc committee to meet to talk about what we can do. One of the things that we always have to remember is that one of the big goals of our program is to work with that next generation of conservationists. And to do that, we have to choose our animal collections very carefully so that we can work safely with the collection with our animals. The hallmark of this program is that it's always been a hands-on program. That was true in Frank's time, and it's true in our time today. To do that safely, of course, we have to pick and choose animals that we know we can manage well with the help of students. So very good question. We'll see where we are after our ad hoc committee finally gets a chance to meet.
There's a question from Bill Eberhardt, who asks, are there any members of the Trevor family currently involved with the zoo? I think we might have some future.
We might have some future Trevor family members involved in the zoo, hopefully based on their visiting the zoo. We have Frank's, I believe they would be Frank's great-grandchildren who visit the zoo today, and I hope they love it as much as he did. One of the things, of course, that you saw in that video is that times have really changed. We have a lot more USDA, AZA, New York State DEC, Department of Health, et cetera, regulations than existed back in the 30s, 40s, and 50s. But it hopefully will be an exciting place for generations to come, and I certainly think it will be.
Yvonne asks, will the new class in September be able to be zooies in the full sense?
That's the $64,000 question, isn't it, Yvonne? We're very hopeful that we will be running our normal and regular program in the fall. We have no idea exactly how that will play out at this point. We here at the zoo, as well as the school itself, are watching closely every day to developments as they come about in the coronavirus pandemic, and we're watching carefully to see the various pieces of either legislation or recommendations that come out from both the federal sets of guidelines that are coming out, as well as the New York State guidelines. Governor Cuomo is doing an excellent job every day of keeping us posted on how things are going here in New York. And our hope is to be open as soon as possible to be able to continue our excellent work of education and helping people understand the need for conservation and for understanding the role that we play in conservation, all of us. But we have to be able to do that safely. So a lot remains to be determined, but our goal is certainly to open with a regular program in the fall to welcome back that next crop of zooies and the next crop of what we hope will be conservationists.
Sybil asks, are there current relationships with the larger zoos to exchange animals to help to grow the populations of certain species?
That's another great question, Sybil. Yes, one of the wonderful aspects of being accredited by the Association of Zoos and Aquariums is it gives us access to all of the animals that, as we say it, we cooperatively manage. So, pick any species, and we're looking at what is the best for that species, not necessarily what is always best for any individual zoo. So, for example, we have been really excited to have both ringtail lemur babies and black and white ruffed lemur babies this year. And those animals will become part of the collaboratively managed collection of animals that AZA oversees in all of its zoos. At some point, some of those animals move around. So our baby lemur may at some point move to another zoo, or another lemur may come to our zoo from a different space. And that is really the way it is with all of the animals that we all exhibit, which is, I think, one of the biggest benefits of being associated with the AZA.
I think that's it for questions.
Okay. Well, that looks like that's all the questions that we have. So I just would like to end with, I hope you've enjoyed this episode. I want to remind you that all of the episodes of Trevor Zoo Live can be found on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/Trevor Zoo Millbrook. And also that you can watch our live streaming cameras for lemurs, red pandas, and the wildlife on the pond, mostly waterfowl, at www.millbrook.org/Trevor Zoo Live. So thank you for spending part of your Wednesday with us. We hope to see you again at the same time next week. Thanks for watching. Be well and see you soon.